I did not for one moment think we were going to get like over 1,000 antigen tests dumped into the positives today.
So yeah, whoa, numbers through the roof. Can you sort it out for us common folk? What's going on here?
The people who are getting sick now, it's skewing younger and younger. Older people, people with health conditions, we're doing our best to socially distance, avoid large crowds, wear masks, stay home as much as possible. But younger, healthier Iowans are now the ones who are going out and they're having parties and barbecues and going about their lives normally, especially if they're not wearing masks, they're going to get sick. And what we're seeing now, and I knew that antigen tests were happening because I've been getting a number of messages from followers. Hey, is this test at Doctors Now? Is that counted? What about the one at Stroke Detection Center? How about at Van Buren County Hospital? And until this week, those tests weren't being counted. Earlier this week, when Governor Reynolds and Dr. Brodati had their press conference, Dr. Brodati explained that through guidance from the CDC, all antigen tests would be counted. Specifically, positives would be counted as positives, and negatives would be deemed inconclusive. The trick with that is that antigen tests do a very good job of noticing the proteins on the outside of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. If it finds a positive, that's definitely going to be a positive. But antigen tests can also have false negatives. So if you have someone who either was exposed or is symptomatic and again was exposed, and they get a negative, that's really not necessarily a negative. And in that case, the person needs to go and get a PCR to confirm. It's important for those tests to be counted, and now they are, which caused today's numbers to just skyrocket.
Okay, so the antigen tests are being dumped in now that weren't previously dumped in.
Yep.
But those can also give false negatives.
Yep. So the way you have to think about it is PCRs have false negatives. So like the person is actually positive, but the test comes back negative. Antigen tests are the same way. No test is perfect. Not even influenza tests are perfect. So what we have to think about, kind of as a way to wrap our heads around this, the number of positives we have, those are definitely true positives, but we likely have more. And based on what we know from the CDC director, Dr. Robert Redfield, there is more. Random antibody sampling is showing that the infection is around 10 times as many people, which is scary to think that we could have anywhere from 300,000 to 600,000 Iowans already either having had the virus or have it currently. Probably not that many right now, but there's an upside. The upside being if we have had that many more positives and we didn't even know because they were asymptomatic or it felt like a cold or something really minor, they got over it. That means our case fatality rate is a lot lower than basing it just off of who we have tested positive. Yeah. So there's kind of like, there's the upside of knowing that our case fatality rate is lower, but there's the downside of thinking, oh my gosh, was it less safe before? Is it less safe now? And the easy way to approach that fear is to say, I'm just going to keep social distancing. I'm going to wear my mask. I'm only going to go out for the grocery and that's it. I'm going to work from home. I'm going to keep my family home and we will ride this out as it goes. All the rules are the same. Doesn't really change anything. It's a big, scary thing to think we have a little over 3 million Iowans and anywhere from like maybe 10% or more could have already had this. Until we have the ability to have widespread, easy access to testing, we won't have a very good idea.
Isn't the testing gone down?
It's been fluctuating. Most of July, we had stable testing around 40,000 tests processed every week. And then after that July 4th bump, where a bunch of people needed to get tested because they were sick, we saw testing decrease by 10,000 tests over the course of 2 weeks. And then it bumped back up again. So testing is it's moving around. That's good and bad. If it would be because people weren't getting sick as often, decrease in testing would make sense because fewer people would want to go get tested. If it's because of external reasons, that's a problem. And the fact that our testing went back up as kids were going back to their college towns, that's a good sign that we still have that capacity and we're utilizing it. And what we've seen with the increase in positives, we've had a major jump. We've gone from having 500 to 700 on any given day. Now I'm expecting like 900 to 1300 on any given day. And that's partially due to college kids going back, but it's also partially due to students, kids like my son, going back to school, parents going back to their normal lives. All of these behaviors are going to lead to more spread. And as spread increases, the only thing we can really do as individuals is to pull back and say, I'm not going to be a part of this. I am going to keep my family as close to me as possible. We're going to limit our exposure. Families with less risk. Maybe they have only a couple underlying conditions that aren't very severe, or they have no underlying conditions. In those situations, families can create a bubble, like their best friends who live next door with their kids. Those two families become a bubble that interact with each other. These are the kind of things we're going to have to be doing throughout the pandemic because we've got at least another year ahead of us for most Americans. I know that the president and Dr. Fauci and Dr. Redfield are trying to get a vaccine out that is safe and effective as fast as they can. But it's going to roll out in batches because it takes time, it takes money, and it takes manpower to create every single vaccine dose. So it's going to roll out to healthcare workers and frontline workers first. And that's great because then they're going to be safe and protected, but there's still going to be a certain percentage of people. My small man. There's still going to be a percentage of people who aren't immune yet. And that means the virus can jump from person to person still. Once we get around 70 to 80% of people are either immune through vaccination or immune because they had the virus, then it's going to become a lot more safe and we can start to go back to real life, regular life, where you can go to Target on a Saturday because you feel like it. The antigen test being added has been a developing situation. People like myself who are working in public health, both in public health departments, but also as independent researchers, we've been hearing from regular Iowans, everyday Iowans saying, I got an antigen test and positive, what do I do? And the rules are still the same because the antigen is looking for the virus. And if you've got proteins from the virus, you probably still have it. You isolate, you stay home, right? But those people weren't getting counted in our positives. So we didn't have as much of like a clear idea of what spread was doing. It's gotten added now because the CDC has made it clear that antigen tests are an approved method. So it's been handed down from higher levels of public health. And the science backs up the fact that antigen tests are reliable. They have a very high accuracy rate for finding true positives. So it's a good test. It's a good type. And we should be counting those positives because they are people who have or have had COVID-19.
It's actually kind of a positive development.
It is. It's a big shock in the system to see, wow, we got 2,228 positives since 10:30 last night. Like I was like, whoa, that's a very big number. And I had to like sit back and let it marinate for a few minutes. And I was like, wait, some of those are antigen tests. They have to be. Because Dr. Padati herself had mentioned that they would be going into the data. They definitely showed up in force. We did not have a big jump in recoveries. That tells me that at least a portion of those antigen tests have probably happened within the last 2 weeks. Most people recover 14 days. Some people recover at 28 days, like if they haven't been contacted or if they've just been too sick and they haven't gotten better. The state recovers people at 28 days. So the people who got those tests could still be positive with the virus and still experiencing symptoms. Since recoveries didn't jump, at least not yet, they might later today, because when the state adds new data in, it kind of comes in waves. It doesn't all happen at one time. At this point, there's still probably like 12 to 24 hours ahead of us where the data might change. And Iowans will be sending me messages saying, whoa, what's going on with the data? I need an explanation here. And I'll be like, I got you. Here's the explanation. A lot of what's going on is going to require all of us to pay attention, but take a beat and kind of slow down a little before we have that emotional reaction. We all do. I did this morning. I was like, wow, that's a large number. That's a Texas large number, not an Iowa large number. Mm-hmm. The addition of the antigens on top of our normal spread of between 900 and 1,300 positives every day, that made sense to my head. It's about what I would have expected. All throughout the pandemic, it's been kind of a growing crest. Individual Iowans reaching out, teachers reaching out, local legislators reaching out, trying to understand what's going on, but also to report, for instance, if there is a positive on a football team, giving me that information, then I can have my ear to the ground to see if the school comes forward and says, hey, we had a positive. I try my best to only post information when I've heard it from multiple sources. The stories are all the same. That's a good sign that anecdotal data is reliable information. And then also whenever a school comes forward, I post that. And so last week, I got a phone call from a very nice PR lady at the Iowa State Educators Association. It's this teachers union for our state. And she said, we'd like to partner with you to create a self-reporting engine. So schools, parents, students they themselves come forward, put that information in, we can have it in a centralized location, export that data to a Google map so that it populates. And we can see any of the 1,321 school buildings, do they have positives? When did those positives happen? Are those positives now recovered? This kind of idea that we have this data available because the state is not going to produce that information for us. We need to understand how this virus is spreading in schools, among students, among teachers, school staff, paraeducators, bus drivers, and families, because schools are not an island in the middle of nowhere. There are people attached, parents, siblings attached to every individual person that is in that school. So for us to have this data and to be able to encourage Iowans to safely share their information such that all people's, like every single person's identity, anything that could be traced back to a person is going to be housed completely off the internet. In my physical hard drive that is literally within an arm's reach at any point in time, even when I'm asleep, that information will be there. Whereas all of the information that does not identify a person, positive status, negative status, school location, I'm not going to be asking at all for people's individual addresses. We don't want that information. We want to know what's going on with the school and what's associated with the school, just like with nursing homes and how kids can get infected from nursing home positives through a care worker or a family member. We want to have this information so that we can then help schools, give them guidance, but also help families guidance. These kinds of pieces of data will give us a lot of ability moving forward to make better decisions for our communities. The data on the state's website, there is still a little bit of backdating occurring, but it's looking like it's slowing down. So whatever backdating they were doing to try to get each individual positive and negative to the right day for when they did test positive or did test negative, that's still happening, but it's not as common now. What I report on any given day is probably going to be a few hundred positives off from what the state says, because we don't have de-identified data from the state. As a result, I can only report what shows up on every single day. And I don't have the ability to know that a positive that's 2 days in the future actually was for today. So there's going to be a little bit of difference, but there isn't going to be the same variability that there was prior to the state coming forward and saying, okay, we fixed the problem. We're now going to report as timely as we can. We thought we were before. Turns out there was a major glitch in the system and we weren't. They got that part fixed, which is good. That's great. Because the more we know about what's happening right now, or in like the current kind of present where it's within a week on either side of us, the better we can make decisions as to whether or not it's, safe to go to the park today, or maybe I'm going to wait 3 weeks. And definitely for the counties that have universities in them, no one should be going anywhere or doing anything. Johnson County is having a massive spike among college students, and that spread is going to leave the campus and go into restaurants, into bars. Now the bars are closed. That's a lot better. Same thing for Story. Story County is having a massive spike because, once again, we have a lot of students here. And just based on my experience, my husband and son and I, we go for drives a couple times a week, and we always go through campus because we want to see how kids are doing, what campus is doing. I would say that masks outside are very hit or miss. It's maybe 1 or 2 people out of 10 have a mask outside, and everyone should be wearing them everywhere. You walk out your own front door, your mask goes on. Your mask stays on until you go home or to your dorm room or wherever, because you just can't know if the student you're walking next to is an asymptomatic positive and they have no idea. Everyone, all of us in our individual counties, looking at our county numbers or looking at the state as a whole, they're spread everywhere now. So the best thing all of us can do is stay home as much as possible. We have Netflix, we have the internet, we've got board games, we've got all kinds of things inside our houses that can keep us busy. And if we need to go out, we need to be as safe as we possibly can. Wear a face mask, face shield too, if that's available. Definitely do that. Wash our hands frequently. Try to stay as far away from other people. 6 feet is good. That's a bare minimum, but you want to stay as far back as you can. There's no amount of space that's too much space. Because if we stay home, then that's 100% space. The best thing we can do is just use all the tools we have and keep practicing our tools. Because as we practice, we get better at it. We become more aware. We're more able to do risk assessments that way.
Knowledge is power.
It is.
Yeah.
It absolutely is.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.
Yep.